Hello, and welcome to Keep Middlesex Moving's Mobility Matter podcast. I'm Christina Fowler, and I'm joined today by my fellow co-host, Chris Gonda. Hey, Chris.
Hi, Christina. How are you today?
Great. How are you?
I'm excellent. It's a wonderful day to be recording.
It certainly is. It certainly is. So on today's episode, we have Mike Dannemiller, supervising engineer at the Middlesex County Office of Planning. Thank you for joining us, Mike.
Oh, glad to be here.
So before we get into this episode, Mike, can you give our listeners a little background about your path over the years and how you found yourself in your current role at the county?
Oh, sure. I'd be happy to. I am a civil engineer who spends most of his time just trying to keep people safe, however they choose to travel. I have had a varied path leading to that. I've been a traffic calming, senior mobility, sidewalk accessibility instructor, and I was one of Smart Growth America's first 50 complete street instructors, which just gave me a whole lot of opportunity to go around the country and work with people from all over the place about how to make travel safe in their communities. It was kind of fun seeing the differences. Like Houston and Chicago have different ideas about snow removal, and Space Coast, Florida, and Martha's Vineyard, they have different opinions about recreational travel, but all that built to making sure that we can make all of our streets complete for everyone, however they choose to move around.
So you mentioned complete streets. Now, all of us in the room are somewhat familiar with what that is, but for our listeners, can you define what complete streets are and what that looks like in New Jersey?
Yeah, absolutely. Complete streets. First off, they branded it right. Who's ever going to argue that they want an incomplete street, right? According to New Jersey DOT, complete streets are designed for safe access for all users. And they go on to say pedestrians, bicyclists, motorists, and transit riders of all ages, all abilities, must be able to move safely along and across a complete street in all weather conditions at any time of day. I mean, even the United States DOT reinforces this. They say complete streets are streets designed and operated to enable safe use and support mobility for all users. So it basically means take care of everybody, keep people safe however they choose to travel, not just people in trucks and not just roads that don't flood when it rains. There's more to it than that. That's the civil part of civil engineering.
Yeah, there's absolutely more to it than that. And when we think of mobility for all, we just had our conference to talk about that in regard to sustainability and equity, as well as safety. Now, we know that the state is working on making strides in that regard. Now, how would you explain mobility for all, and why are complete streets for everyone? Like, who is entitled to a complete street and who is not?
So when I was in engineering school, we learned how to design roads so that a truck could swing a turn and so that when it rained, it didn't flood. Well, that's not the civil part of civil engineering. If you want to envision a 12-year-old kid who wants to get from home to school and they would like to travel on their own, now it's probably that kid's caregiver, that student's parent or guardian who's going to make the decision on whether they feel it's safe for that youngster to travel on their own. That's the design vehicle I try to keep in my head. It's a 12-year-old would like to travel independently and would like to go to school on their own. And it's whether or not they're going to be allowed to because their family has decided, oh yeah, that road? Sure, of course you can go on your own, whether you're walking or you're biking or you're going with a group of friends, either way. And that's what I try to keep in mind. It's about families having safe choices to get around.
And we can see how the statement or signs that we see for share the road, they don't say quite enough. Now, who can use the street? Who can use the road for walking and biking?
Well, share the road signs are sort of I'll use a tongue-in-cheek expression, thou shalt not murder. It's everyone can legally use the roadway. Bicyclists, all they need is a little space. They're a vehicle, a non-motorized vehicle, that travels a little more slowly than the motorized vehicles they're sharing the road with. It's almost like a tractor. If you're in an agricultural area, you probably expect to see tractors now and then. And what do you do when you see a tractor? If you're a driver, you wait for it because it's probably going a little more slowly. And when it's safe to pass, you go around, you give plenty of room, at least 4 feet. We can talk about that in our New Jersey 4-foot passing law that's been in place for over a year now. But just like passing a tractor, you wait till it's safe, you go around. If the road's too skinny to operate side by side, it's still legal for cyclists to use a roadway. Many would choose not to, or would prefer to be in a protected or a separate facility, but it is legal for cyclists to use the roadway. It's also safe, or it's also legal to walk on a roadway. Let's just make sure motorists recognize that driving is a privilege, not a right. They're licensed and there are rules that they must remember and obey. And if they don't, maybe those licenses are in jeopardy.
Yeah, and I say it a lot. It's not a popular statement, but speeding is not a right either.
No, absolutely not. Speeding kills. The speed differential is what makes traffic congestion worse, crashes worse. If speed differential, if it's designed for 25, you shouldn't have some people going 25 and some trying to go 50.
Yeah. So Mike, you mentioned that you're a trainer for Complete Streets nationwide. What did those trainings look like? And could you tell me more about those types of field exercises that you used to inspire and enable communities to see what it's like out there on the streets?
Oh, sure. There's a lot of variations on a theme of a walk audit or a bike audit or a senior mobility workshop audit. All of them really boil down to 3 basic components. Get the right group of people together, stakeholders, people who have a say and an interest, and give them some common background so that they have a common perspective. And then ideally, go outside. Usually you can go wherever your meeting is. It can be, when I've worked with students at Rutgers University, we've done a walk around the block right at the school. Almost every facility has examples of good and bad when you're looking at things. I say bad judgmentally, things that are could be slightly better. But looking at that, something in the field, real time, you can both build consensus that, oh, is there a problem? And if there is, what are some of those tools in the box that we had just talked about a few minutes ago together that might apply in this spot? And then you're brainstorming together and real time, you're coming up with those ideas. And then typically you'd go to the third step, reconvene back in a classroom or parking lot or wherever, and say, okay, out of everything we heard, especially if you have a large group that broke into separate conversations, say, oh, this group heard this. This group heard that. We came up with this idea. But then you can start to build consensus together that would then get used for making, if it's just paint or operational changes, that's small potatoes. But if you're talking about anything bigger and you're talking about funding applications, then you've built local consensus with those stakeholders from the first step, literally. And that can be wonderful. If I take another second, one thing that's really, really wonderful to do if you have the resources and the time, I've done a lot of workshops where I've brought a wheelchair or I've brought crutches. Wheelchairs are especially, universal. I mean, on average, everybody's going to need some kind of mobility assistance device at some point in their life, is the statistic I've heard. And when you give somebody the opportunity to sit in a wheelchair and try and go straight on a sidewalk past a steep driveway. And that driveway, it's got a bit of a cross slope. It slopes either towards or away from the roadway. Especially if it's sloping towards the roadway, it takes a lot of strength to get that wheelchair to go straight. And I was with a group of Department of Public Works folks up in Massachusetts doing one of these national workshop series for the state of Massachusetts. And this big, strong DPW staff member, he's like, oh yeah, let me do that. And he was pushing as hard as he could on just a left hand just to try and go straight. And he looked at the thing, he said, I never realized how important cross slope, how much a sidewalk slopes from one side to to the other as it goes straight across the driveway really meant. And that's something I know he'll never forget, and I won't forget the image of this guy is a whole lot stronger than me, not able to make a wheelchair go straight on something he had impact and influence over the design and maintenance of.
And I agree. And I've accompanied you with a couple of the workshops around Rutgers, and it really leaves an impression, not just to look at what's out there, but to experience what it's like to use those facilities as if I had a mobility, but if I had a disability or trouble getting around one way or another. So to be able to put someone in a wheelchair and give them a bit of that experience, I think that's really powerful.
Oh, absolutely. Some of my friends have also, they'll bring goggles that are like smeared with petroleum jelly, which most of the folks who are traveling who are legally blind, they have some vision, but they can't see so well. That's why things like curb ramps that have the little red area that's like 2 foot by 4 foot allows folks to target to the destination at the far side of the crosswalk much better. And my sight's pretty good. I wear glasses. They help me see far away. But if I was legally blind but could see a bit, that visually contrasting color, and often they have truncated domes for if you're fully vision impaired and need a tactile warning before you step out from the safety of a sidewalk to the danger of there may be crossing traffic. But just the contrasting color can be a big deal. And for people to experience that in the safety of a group, but personally together can be really great for brainstorming ideas on how to make our traveling environment safer for everyone.
Great. So with the walkability training and those types of field exercises, we talked about using wheelchairs or having goggles that might impair the vision of the users as they're in this controlled group for these audits. Do you have any other interesting props or things that you use or exercises that you've done with participants to let them experience what it's like out there for someone with disabilities?
So a few years back, I was working with Seeing Eye up in Morristown, and they would bring blindfolds and they would bring goggles, and then they also did a funny thing where willing participants would say, "Okay, I will take those little marbles and I will put them in my shoes." And to walk, it simulated having real physical challenge of okay, it's difficult for me to walk, especially walk quickly, and that was a way that was fairly extreme to me. It said, wow, this is uncomfortable, maybe this is why I'm not walking so quickly. And so crossing speed, which you use as a factor for setting signal timing. Traffic signals work on a clock, and you calculate minimum green time by how long it takes to walk from here to there, and generally that's at about 3 feet per second. I can walk a whole lot quicker than that when I'm feeling good, but there's been times in my life when I was not walking that fast. And it's easy to take for granted if you are pretty mobile that maybe not everybody is as mobile as you are. And to simulate some situations that reinforce that is really impactful especially for designers.
And how would you say that discomfort affects the daily choices of people that face them?
Simply being able to walk to a bus, catchment area for walk to a bus is relative. Some people would be willing to walk 100 yards. It's easy for a planner, an engineer to say, oh, well, okay, half-mile walking radius to get to a bus stop, to get on a bus, to climb on the bus, to get off the bus and walk to a destination. That is a luxury for some people. A lot of people pride themselves. My mother, God rest her soul, was so happy when she could minimize the amount of distance she had to walk. She wanted to park as close as she could. She wanted the desk as close to facilities that she needed in the building where she worked. And that's because she wasn't comfortable walking. Earlier in her life, she was probably more comfortable, but a lot of people would say, walk 1 inch more than I have to? Why in the world would I do that? Others pay to go to a gym and walk. There's probably some kind of happy in between.
And you mentioned the marbles in the shoes, and I have a 5-year-old I kind of know what that's like. And I mean, he's left some marbles on the floor and I stepped on them and I felt them for about a week. But I'm just imagining the discomfort that people would feel, not just from that exercise, but if that was something they had to face day to day. I could see how that would absolutely affect, how they feel about going to a bus stop or even walking to school or wherever it may be.
Sure. And anybody who's using a wheelchair probably has got some kind of complicating physical ailment that got them to be in that wheelchair. So taking a bunch of single day Department of Public Works staff who are generally relatively physically fit, drop them in a wheelchair. Okay, they don't have the experience of here's the subtleties of how to use it, but I've used a wheelchair, probably more than the average person who doesn't have to, and it's hard. It is not good. And the subtleties of the walking environment, a 1/4 inch lip is a big deal. It can pitch you out and over. I mean, I was out with folks from New Jersey DOT doing one of those trainings, and I remember, there were probably 6 people taking pictures of me trying to get over a concrete sidewalk that had been heaved because there was this beautiful tree, I think it was an oak, that shoved a section of the sidewalk up a couple inches, and I was determined to figure out how I was going to get over and around that. That was on a dry, cool, comfortable day. Add some rain, some snow, make it cold or really hot. Those can be real challenges. Those compound quickly. And so you're taking part of your population that's not as mobile and then compounding for day-to-day travel, that can be a real challenge. So, the devil's in the details, and they compound quickly.
So with the impact and the observations that people really experience during these walk audits using these mobility devices, or even abled people going out and seeing their their built environment, what interesting projects have those led to and changes in these people's communities?
Yeah, absolutely. So I live up in West Orange, and the Board of Ed has been putting together travel plans for several of the schools, and the West Orange Pedestrian Safety Advisory Board worked with them and put together some ideas around one of the schools. Happened to be Redwood School along Woodland Ave, and there have been several things that were implemented as a result of walk audits and preparing school travel safety plans. And they range from a simple thing. They tried out a pop-up bike lane along this road that was a little over 30 feet wide. And they said, oh, well, we could just add edge striping to narrow the travel lane for motor vehicles and add a bike lane. And they tried it. They put it down with temporary paint. It wasn't a very high volume roadway. That temporary paint lasted almost a year. And when it started to wear out, the town said, wow, there were no complaints. This is a good thing. And they restriped it. Now that's permanent. Further up that road, adjacent to the school, there were a couple intersections that weren't really at a right angle. When roads come in at a little bit of a skew, sometimes those intersections get really big. And that was a case on either side of the front door of an elementary school. And it was in between a residential area and the school. And these students were crossing there every day. And so what they did was they put up a couple of channelization islands. I'll call them a pork chop island that just channeled where the motorists have to go so they couldn't cut through the middle of this big, wide open expanse of asphalt. And that dramatically shortened crossing distances that they paired with some high visibility crosswalks, just putting down a little bit of paint. And all of a sudden, it was a whole lot friendlier for all the families that lived on that side of the school catchment area to walk to school. It was short dollars to get a whole lot of benefit, and that was direct result. Other examples, in Madison Township, we did a senior walkability audit there. I knew they did a bunch of pedestrian safety enhancements, direct result of doing a senior walkability audit. And Chris, what you and I did a year ago, we were in Perth Amboy and Piscataway, and we did both walk and bike audits. NJTPA did notify us recently that they provided substantial grants to for projects in Perth Amboy and Piscataway, and those are one of the contributing factors to those funding applications was the fact that we did walking and handlebar. I'll add biking to this whole dynamic. Audits of those corridors, and those refine the concepts that we put together for those funding applications, and they were both awarded. Combined, that's $18 million. And it's
Oh, wow.
real money, and I'd like to think that part of the strength of those applications was the fact that we did walk audits and handlebar audits at each location. And
That's cool.
I hear that KMM has capacity. I want to remind everybody, yes, I'm an engineer over at Middlesex County, but KMM has the capacity to do walk audits, and maybe NJTPA does as well.
And walk audits are something that we are interested in doing within the communities of Middlesex County. But yeah, what we'd like to do are gather stakeholders who are interested in improving their facilities for pedestrians and bicyclists, and get them to not just walk them with us, but to observe, what the traffic behaviors are, what their built environment is like, and how does that affect the people who live there. And Mike and I had participated in the handlebar audits in Perth Amboy, Spotswood, and in Piscataway, where we gathered together with other folks on bikes. And we rode different sections that were part of the study area to see what they felt like, to see how traffic treated us, and to find out what could be improved in regard to perhaps maybe slowing the road down, or at least painting areas where it's designated for us to be riding bikes and people know where they should be driving their cars. So I'm not sure what types of improvements have been identified by that, but from those experiences on the handlebar audits, were there any interesting findings that you could remember?
Oh, absolutely. In Perth Amboy, we're looking at Smith Street along through downtown. And as we were walking those corridors, we were able to real time together as a group identify, oh, if we did a curb extension, some people call them bulb outs. If we did curb extensions at these locations, we could cut the crossing distance literally in half. And you can stand there in the roadway a couple of feet out and visualize where you would have a protected curb, where you'd expand the sidewalk area, and it doesn't take away any legal parking. You're not allowed to park within 25 feet of the corner anyway, so you can take that space. And if we wanted to go the next step, we could have brought some chalk and said here, but when you're there together as a group, you can just stand in a spot and you're watching for traffic and keeping everyone safe. That's why it's nice to be in a group, but you can very easily visualize when you're standing there and say, oh, this curb, instead of being at this spot, could be 8 feet further out. And that'll force motorists to be able to really have to slow down to negotiate this turn. Still plenty of room for a truck to swing through an intersection and plan for those things. But if you can cut the crossing distance for pedestrians in half and have them, when they're waiting for traffic, to look to see if it's safe to cross, be behind a raised curb, a vertical curb in a protected area, that can make a world of difference. It also gives room for things like rain gardens or street trees or bike racks, gaining a little bit of real estate in a protected realm and not dedicating it all to moving traffic, because a lot of our infrastructure, a lot of our space, especially in our urban grids, is right now dedicated to the roadway, and maybe that balance isn't always quite where it could be to emphasize safety for our most vulnerable users. You can come back to the 12-year-old, the family traveling in all weather conditions. We want to make it safe and comfortable for them. People driving cars, they got a steel cage around them. They're gonna be comfortable and safe, and they have all kinds of other safety features that do just keep getting better and better. We should also make it safe for everyone else who's using the public realm as well.
And you mentioned something that I didn't think of at first when it came to what the walk audits can do for a community, and not just to identify safety improvements, but to also consider placemaking. And you'd mentioned rain gardens and nice features that you could add to the street that would also be safety related, but they would have more than one function.
Oh, absolutely. A rain garden. So a rain garden is just a way to take a little bit of runoff from a roadway and see if you can not just immediately get into a catch basin and out and away. When you look at a road, roads get messy. There are drips from cars, there's garbage, there's stuff. And when it rains, most of the time when it rains, it only rains a little bit. And that first flush of all that nastiness off the road, if you could capture that and filter it in an environmentally safe way before it goes into our drainage system with things like I'll call it a rain garden, but all it is basically a planter that grabs the runoff from the road. It runs through this little planter, and then anything that's left over and filtered that the grass doesn't soak in or doesn't infiltrate, then the rest goes into the drainage system. That can filter out a lot of the nastiness and some are combined sewer overflows. Some things go right into our waterways. I'd love to not get garbage and grime off the road into those systems. So to me, it's very old school. It's very low tech. It's like a Roman kind of solution of, okay, can we build it really well? And it just might make everything work just a little bit better. So things like rain gardens, as long as they're taken care of, can really enhance a drainage system.
That's really interesting. And I know that there are many cases in New Jersey where these walk audits started conversations for things related to policy changes in municipalities. Can you talk more about that?
Middlesex County, I believe, is the first county in New Jersey to have a Vision Zero policy. There's a couple of towns, and they're doing great. Jersey City, Hoboken, Montclair, I think. There's others, but I think we're the first county to have a Vision Zero program, which is we want to make sure that we can eliminate serious injuries and fatalities on our roadway system. And to do that, we need to prioritize safety. Safety, making sure people get to their destination alive, I think, is more important than getting to your destination quickly. Going fast for a short portion of a trip is not nearly as important as completing your trip safely. And really, that's what Vision Zero to me boils down to. Let's keep people alive. I made a joke earlier about the civil side of civil engineering. This is the epitome of it. The civil side of things is, okay, we're going to keep our people safe. All our traveling people should get where they're going safely. Maybe that's going to take an extra minute. Maybe it's going to, make people have to be a tiny bit more patient. Well, I'd rather be patient in traffic, knowing that it's saving lives, than someone was trying to cut us off because they were trying to get somewhere more quickly. But it does mean, on the engineering side, changing what our performance measures is, how we define success on projects. If safety is our number one goal, maybe that is more important than our level of service, the LOS, or even capacity. Maybe there's times where we don't need as many lanes as some lanes are striped out to be. Road diets or lane diets can be a way to change safety, change characteristics of a road. And if our top performance metric, our measure of success, if the number one is reduction of fatalities and serious injuries, then people's projects will come out a little bit differently than how many cars can we possibly get through this intersection right now.
Yeah, that's a huge difference in regard to expanding the capacity or the level of service of an intersection versus protecting the people who are using it, especially when we're thinking about vulnerable road users. And you mentioned this earlier, that our safe passing law in New Jersey is just over a year old. I know you've done a lot in regard to complete streets, but how have you contributed to that in the state and the passing of the safe passing law?
So the Nikhil Badlani Foundation is a group that was set up because there's a tragic story there. It's a family in West Orange. Young boy was killed in a car crash, and the family took that and wanted to make good out of their loss, and they set up the Nikhil Badlani Foundation, and there's scholarship funds for music and athletically minded folks, and they've done a ton in the world of traffic safety. And at their big event, the last 2 years, there has been a walk for Nikhil, and it's a big fundraiser. And you walk around a neighborhood and around the West Orange high school track. And I've helped lead a bike ride. And last year, to help increase awareness of the 4-foot passing law, a couple other riders and I, Jim Hunt, helped lead that. And we took pool noodles, those styrofoam or foam noodles that are about 4 feet long, and we bungee corded them to the frame of our bicycle just under the seat, having it stick out to the left approximately 4 feet. It looked goofy, but it demonstrated the space, the cushion that motorists should give cyclists to say, hey, do not come within this zone. And okay, so my children's friends who were on the ride, might not have acknowledged my existence during the ride because it looked a little funny, but it really drove a point home. That was in an environment that was pretty organized, but you could do that at any point in time. You could take a pool noodle and strap it underneath the seat of your bike with a little bungee cord or some duct tape and show, hey, this space from me riding my bike on the right side of the road, and this thing sticking out to the left, which is the buffer between you, the cyclist, and where motor vehicles are going to be passing you. And instead of just your 2.5, 3 foot wide space of your body, have this extra little thing sticking out that says, you know what, this is a no-go zone. Please don't hit this pool noodle. That's the cushion of safety that now and for the past year in New Jersey has been required for motorists to provide cyclists. And that's a nice, very physical way in a slightly funny kind of environment to say, look, just please don't kill us. Please give us a little room, and especially if you're going to pass and then make a right, don't speed up and pass. Just wait. We'll get there. We may not be going as fast as you, but there's an example of wait 10 seconds and maybe save a life.
It's the idea of a pool noodle is just so smart. It's a simple tactic. Whether you're on your bicycle or you're on your scooter, or even there's people that even use their wheelchairs, and just the idea of that space that's required. Overall, listening to both of you, you covered so much. But before we wrap this up, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners with regards to the walk audits or the 4 feet law?
Well, I'll start off with, anytime a community gets together and gets a group of, I'll call them stakeholders, but interested parties, people who care about travel safety, and they work together, get a little common perspective, maybe go and take a look at a corridor and look at things with a unified eye and say, oh, does it have to be this way? Could it be a little different? Is something as simple as putting some paint down, a high visibility crosswalk, or a lane striping to dedicate a bike lane? Those are short dollars with a lot of return on investment. And if there's bigger stuff, okay, build some consensus from the first step. If you're going to chase any of these really competitive funding applications, there are opportunities out there. And especially if you show that you've worked together to develop ideas, my experience is those have been some of the strongest funding applications we put together. And that can work really, really well. So working together with things like the walk audits that KMM helps to put together and offer for folks, that can be a great way to set yourself up for the little projects that maybe municipalities can do on their own, or the bigger projects that you've going to have to go after funding applications. It helps on the large scale and the small scale.
Thank you, Mike, so much for joining us today. You covered so much. And all the programs that we mentioned today, we will absolutely list on our podcast link. so that everyone can access it. Vision Zero, I mean, the list, I'm writing the list as you were going on, smart growth, everything will be listed. The walk audit from the AARP, we'll have that linked as well. If anyone has any, if any of our listeners need to reach Mike or Chris, of course, just, shoot us an email and we'll connect you. So thank you both very much. Until our next episode, we thank all of our listeners for tuning in, and we hope to see you at the next episode.
Thank you, everyone.
Funded by the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority and the Federal Highway Administration.